Alright, I gotta take an L real quick. Around that time, when I put out the original Vader vs Darth Revan encounter video, I was really interested in shrinking videos down to be fast-paced and bite-sized. The end result was that I took a nuanced counter and skipped a lot of critical information, which caused a lot of issues for a lot of people in their Grand Arena matches. It's the first time that I've made a video that led to people having a worse experience, and for that, I'm sorry. I can promise you that it will never happen again. That all being said, it's a counter I've used many times in my Grand Arena streams, and I've tested it even more in Arena to make sure everything was rock solid. There's a ton of important new information in here, so even if you saw the original video, I'd still suggest sticking around. Forget what you heard, it's time to dive into my favorite way to beat Darth Revan with this absurdly cheap team. To do this right, we need to break down all of the conditions for when you should and should not use this counter. It's not a one-size-fits-all setup, but when you're able to use it, it can be a huge momentum swing in your favor, to the point that it could decide a match. It's all about the details before you jump in. First off, there's certain hard cutoffs for speed. If their Revan is slow, do not use this counter. Even if you're desperate, try something else. You'll just throw away 3 characters if you try a Hail Mary. If your Thrawn is faster than their team, that's fine, but it requires a different approach that we'll cover at the end of this video. If your Vader is faster than their Revan or Bastila, I wouldn't suggest trying this counter. There's a lot of choices involved that are a bit too complex to break down in a guide. It's not exactly a situation I'd expect to see regularly though. On that note, if you encounter a tanky Bastila with heavy health stacking and a crit avoidance arrow, I'd suggest caution. In the arena testing I did, whether I won or lost largely came down to whether Vader was able to crit her or not, and that's a degree of RNG I'm not personally comfortable with. Again, not a build that I expect to see often in 3v3, but be vigilant. Next up is our choice of tank. In the original video, I only showed L3 because she's the only tank I had personally used. I got a lot of feedback from other players who were successful using a lot of modern tanks. Ian made great usage of Kylo Ren unmasked on his streams, even picking up Easy 54 banners, and I've heard from other people that tanks like Shore Trooper worked well. If it has a pre-taunt and can retaunt often, it should work. Kylo Ren unmasked could end up being one of the best scoring tanks for this counter, with his resistance to Malik's health drain making him a promising candidate for easy full protection banners. But I haven't personally tried him due to preference using him as a lead for another team. If Thrawn has to swap to Vader at the start of the fight, I have some concerns about how tanks other than L3 might perform if they get stunned and shocked, but so far, I haven't heard any negative response from people testing other characters. I really enjoy how independent L3 is for this counter, since she can intervene in the early game without relying on Thrawn to clear her off, regardless of how the match plays out. I recognize that she's not the most commonly geared character though, so if you decide to run somebody else, just be aware that some risk may be involved. Lastly, we have to make sure that Darth Revan will die to our Culling Blade. For the sake of consistency, I'm switching the guide to recommend using Choke first. Cull first gets you your second cull back up sooner, so you can mop up Bastila more quickly, but a beefy enemy Revan with high relics means that we need to make more debuffs by using Choke first, and our Vader build needs to be on point. My goal for this team is for this counter to work with typical Vader modding, but certain types of corner cutting will put you at risk against the better Revans you'll face out there. Here's an example. A Vader with 6800 offense and 180% crit damage lands 2 out of 4 debuffs against the Relic 7 Revan, with some extra health and protection modding. Now, the magic number to kill this Revan is 176,000. Due to the number of cut corners in Vader's modding, and the mediocre RNG on Vader's debuffs landing, the damage ends up falling short. Darth Revan survives the blow, and the counter fails. In the exact same conditions, a Relic 8 Vader with 192% crit damage and 8700 offense lands an overwhelming 228,000 damage, resulting in complete overkill and an arguable waste of relegate materials. So where do we need to land then? First off, I think it's important to note that if you have the option, 2 crit chance sets with a crit damage triangle will always be favorable to a crit damage set with a crit chance triangle. If you go the crit chance triangle route, it puts more pressure on you to add enough offense to make up for the missing crit damage. If you don't mind changing up your mods a bit for this counter, Sith Empire's reduction of their own tenacity means that the potency is ultimately wasted in this counter, meaning you could go the damage route here instead, running an offense cross. If we want to aim for him to stay relevant in other battles, then the usual benchmarks will still apply. 250 to 265 speed, 75% crit chance, 85 to 100% potency, and as much offense as you can bring. In this case though, if you want to be secure in matchups against Relic 7 Revens, it's best that we set some hard offense targets to aim for. 7600 should be your minimum target if you're going Relic 7 Revan hunting, but more is more in this case. If your mods lack good offense secondaries, that offense cross could help you get there, at the cost of potency for other counters. Just remember, the crit damage triangle will have a much higher impact than the crit damage set. I'd also strongly recommend giving Vader a protection circle. Malak will always target the character with the least amount of combined health and protection, so with Thrawn running so much protection for extra bulk, that means that Vader is going to be the drain target, and those relics we've given him are a big boost to Malak's drain damage since he only gains health. There are some additional improvements we can make on the modding front to make this fight as smooth as can be. For Thrawn, aim to grab 3 protection primaries, but if you can manage to fit the protection arrow without lowering your speed too much, that's even better. Thrawn doesn't need to be ridiculously fast here, but faster is better, and if you happen to outspeed Revan, it makes the fight a lot easier. Your tank should bring 4 protection primaries. Thrawn's second set, and all of your tank sets should ideally be defense, but if you can't provide defense, don't use health sets or crit chance sets. Anything else will be alright here, just not as useful as defense. Your tank's only concern is that it can taunt regularly while being bulky enough that they won't cause a risk like causing Thrawn to keep getting deathmarked. Another recent change I've added is actually getting some extra speed onto my tank. I'm not talking a crazy amount here, but if you can add a 10 to 15 speed secondary average on all 6 mods, L3 swoops into the battle much sooner to shut down their assault. Now, this does come with a trade-off, since L3 will run out of taunts more quickly, meaning you won't really have time to banner pinch beyond 51 or 52 in most cases. Now, let's talk about execution. The way this counter plays depends entirely on the RNG surrounding Fallen Bastila and her fears. If Vader is feared when Thrawn takes his turn, then use his lead ability to let Vader's fear pass before swapping to Vader. One big change I've made from last time is that we are going to immediately go into Merciless Massacre on Vader, even in situations where Thrawn gets feared and Vader gets debuffed. Because we're using Choke on Malak before going for Culling Blade, it means that the debuffs expire before you go for the Cull, so having him cleanse himself is unnecessary. Once Revan is dead, it's just a simple matter of getting your taunt up and running, keeping everyone alive with Thrawn, and getting Vader to his next Culling Blade to take care of Bastila. Thrawn will probably get Deathmark on him if Vader doesn't land his ability block on Malak, but it gives Thrawn turn meter due to his lead, meaning its duration is reduced and it poses little threat. This is also where that protection modding comes in clutch. Once your tank is online, the battle becomes much more relaxing. Thrawn can use his swap and lead ability to heal people up, cycle fracture cooldowns quickly, and if he can take a turn where he doesn't have corrupted battle meditation, take a fracture on Malak. If you're running L3, I suggest always using her special before her upgrade when possible. It's an infinite source of retaunts, while her upgrades are a finite resource. You're generally just waiting until Vader can kill Bastila with his next Cull, with Merciless Massacre being helpful but not necessarily required. From that point, fracture spam from Thrawn and basic spam from Vader is enough to kill Malak entirely. But you can use the next Merciless Massacre combined with Culling Blade to close the match early if you feel concerned. If your Thrawn is faster than the enemy team, You can Fracture Bastila to set up a favorable match. By the time Fracture ends on Bastila, Vader already almost has his next Culling Blade. It's a nice bonus for if you happen to fight a slower Revan, but most Revans have a competitive speed in 3v3. There's still some other techniques I'd like to test with this counter, and if you'd like to stay up to date with how things are going, or just want to get into nitty gritty in Galaxy of Heroes, stop by my Discord server and say hello. As you can see, there's a lot of variables involved, but if you know me from my Grand Arena streams, you know that I wouldn't be using this counter if I didn't trust it to be consistent. Armed with this knowledge, I hope you'll find it just as enjoyable as I do. Good luck out there, and happy hunting. We're gonna do the choke first style just because I think that's just how I'm gonna... I think that my Vader would be perfectly safe calling here, but my Vader is Relic 8 and I don't want to reinforce or showcase practices that might... You know, I can't say for sure how important Relic 8 has or hasn't been, right? So right off the bat here, you can see Speedy L3 might not have enough speed. We'll see if she goes before BSF, but if she can, it's already like ridiculous stability for this counter, right? So for this point in time, it's kind of iffy on if you go for basic or not. Like, if we ability block, he can't even drain anyway. If he doesn't, it's just going to cause a drain. Yeah, look at this. All right, we're already... Like, yeah, she can try to shock. It doesn't matter. We have CBM, so we don't really have to do anything with this damage on her. Probably just go back into... Let's see. Alright, and from here we're pretty much stable. So this is what I was talking about with like the getting Deathmark too early, right? The Deathmark actually gives us turn meter, so as long as you're not getting Deathmark super early, which is what happened in Zera's case, you're pretty much cozy, right? There's nothing that can really go that wrong for you. Once we get his health a little bit lower, then we will shape for Thrawn not getting feared. She's getting a little bit beat up. So this is like a point that we could just outro right now. Should be perfectly fine. Do we just take it? It's not the best banners. Honestly, the biggest determination for when you should get out of a fight is actually L3 and her levels. So she's not prepared. She's on Mark 3, so we have no real way to re-taunt her anymore. So we probably just take this. Not the best banner performance, but